It works?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so it's not React. It's about apps and mobile apps, to be specific. But mobile apps can be like, there's a lot of technologies out there. So I'm gonna focus on Titanium, and I'll get to that what it exactly is. But it applies to many different technologies as well. This talk. I'll just do so demo it. First, let me start with myself. I am from the Netherlands. I'm Rene Pot is my name. I've arrived here this afternoon, and hopefully I'll be able to leave tomorrow again if the airport works. I'm a developer evangelist for Accelerator, the company that makes Titanium. Now, maybe some of you will think, well, maybe this is going to be a sales pitch. It's not, because Titanium is free, so that's out of the way as well. I've started developing in 2000, so I was 12. I started with like just HTML, but soon some PHP, and then of course JavaScript came along, and mobile is something that I've stuck with for the past 8 years. So yeah, I've encountered a lot of different companies. I've worked for a lot of different projects. So I feel like I have some opinions to share. But before we get to Titanium, let me start with introducing you to some technologies. Most of you probably know React Native, and this is probably where the React word came from. React Native started in 2013 internally, and they went public in 2015. So for the past 4 years, you could have built your apps with that. Then there's NativeScript. This is in C#, so might not apply as much to most web and mobile developers. I don't know NativeScript, that's Xamarin, sorry. And NativeScript is JavaScript. There's Flutter, which is in Go, and then there's Titanium, which is also JavaScript. And Titanium actually started in 2009 with the first public beta. And I don't know what iOS was out, like 2 or 3 or something like that. So it's been around for a long time. Then there, of course, is PhoneGap. And usually I don't talk about it, but in this case I will. PhoneGap is a wrapper around the website. And this is what people's opinion is of cross-platform mobile apps usually. It's like they think it's all web-based, but it's not. Above technologies are all native. But before I continue, I want to know how many people here have developed apps using native technologies or cross-platform technologies. All right, and how many of those are cross-platform? All right, so let's dive into Titanium first. Anyone here heard about Titanium before? 1, 2 hands? Okay, yeah, a couple more. Okay, so Titanium is this. This is how you build mobile apps, and this looks familiar. Like the second part looks like CSS. It's not. The bottom part is JavaScript, and the top part is XML. And this is the default Hello World app. And I'm gonna demo this later as well, so I can demonstrate how fast you can build something starting with the Hello World app. And Titanium under the hood is fully JavaScript. Like when you compile the application, what it will do is it will take your JavaScript code, bundle it into a native application, and launch it on the application. So when you look here and you see window on the top part and the XML part, what it will do in iOS, it will create an actual native window in Android as well. So you'll have all the native behaviors, all the native functionalities that you can expect from a mobile app. So as a user, they will never be able to tell what technology is used to make the windows. However, you need to be careful how you make your apps, of course, because you have to deal with a couple extra things that native developers don't have to deal with. So as I said, it's JavaScript, and we've been around for 10 years. So you could say it's stable and mature. It's been used by a lot of enterprise companies. That's why I say enterprise-backed, because A lot of enterprise customers buy the open source software with their support bundled. So that's the only part that we earn money with. But everything is open source. Like, we don't release any secret versions to our enterprise customers that you can get half a year later. We do everything on GitHub. For, I don't know how long it's on GitHub, but at least a long time. That much that we are closing in on 11,000 pull requests. And it's really easy to learn. In my opinion, it's like the learning curve is much steeper for all the other technologies that I've displayed before. And over the years, I've tried a lot, but I've always came back here. So there's the Alloy MVC framework that you saw earlier with the XML and DSS styling, which gives you some separations of concerns, gives you garbage collection, and garbage collection is huge on mobile, because if you close a window on mobile, you want to make sure you get rid of the memory, because if you don't, apps will crash within 10, 15 minutes. Because on mobile phones, maybe not on iOS, but on Android, you have to deal with phones that are like 100 euros, that have 100 apps running in the background, and you only get like 3 or 4 megabytes of memory, or maybe a couple more. And if you overspend on memory, your apps will crash. This goes native as well. Of course, this is not exclusive to Titanium. With the Alloy, you also get some themes, which is useful if you want to make apps that are deployed to different customers, for example. And it's easily extendable, and I'll demo some of that. And how many people know Backbone.js? Yeah, it's been around for at least as long as Titanium has. It's ancient. But what it does really well. It actually got an update a couple of weeks ago. So it's still alive. And it works really well together with Titanium. Then there's one more thing, in that if you're a native developer, you might recognize this, sort of, like you see class names that are familiar. These are not one-on-one translations, they're different snippets from different functionalities for Android and iOS, because I couldn't find one that we had on GitHub that was cross-platform in that way. We had some demos. But you can see, this is JavaScript. But, for example, this one here, this is an Android class. So what you can do is you can just import Android classes, and then you can use them as if it is with JavaScript. And this makes it really powerful to say, okay, I want this functionality or this framework that someone created. You can just import it in JavaScript, no worry. Here comes the web part. We have Vue.js and Angular support. It's beta. What it means is there's a different rendering engine connected to both of these, but your code will be the same. So you can just change it, and it will create a fully native app, not a web app. So this is something you need to keep in mind. But most of your code you can just move to web, from web to mobile. Then there are some common misconceptions about cross-platform. One of them I hear all the time is that cross-platform apps are always slower than native apps. Well, as I said, if you build your UI, you actually get a native UI. So why would it be slower? In fact, except for games, I would say that 99% of the apps that you see in the App Store or Play Store can be built with cross-platform technologies, and you won't notice it, because the amount of things it does is so minimum, and the amount of data it processes, or the amount of animations you have or whatever, is so minimum that a user will never know if it's cross-platform. And that's why it's also, for me, difficult to know what apps are built with Titanium, because I just cannot see. I need to extract the code to see if there's an SDK included. So this is false. Second one, cross-platform apps are not really native. Well, they actually make native UIs in such a sense that if you go to, for example, Xcode debugger, you can just see, you can go in and see, okay, so this is a window element, this is a label element. You can fully debug it as if it were a native app. It's also false. They're only useful for prototyping. This is something I hear all the time. Like, if you want to try an app, just build it cross-platform, and then once you're serious, you go for native, because, well, it's faster. And this is also a very common misconception, because a lot of companies I've encountered wanted to have a mobile app, and they started prototyping in this, and they came to the conclusion that it's not only cheaper because then you can do one developer instead of two, but also there's no real benefit to go to native if you don't have to. Like as I said, 99% can just work fine. The 1% does all the crazy stuff, and that might be a bit more complicated for a cross-platform. And yeah, of course, I only have a couple minutes here to demonstrate it, so I cannot go into depth on these kind of topics, but trust me, like all the companies I worked for before joining this company, they had the idea to switch to native at some point, but they all dropped it because they saw no benefit in rewriting their code and hiring more developers. So, and this also goes into this one. When a company grows, you want to switch. That's not true. I mean, if you need 3 iOS developers and 3 Android developers for a medium-sized company or a bigger company, for example, you could have 6 JavaScript developers doing this stuff. And if they need to work on Node.js backend or on their website or whatever, you have the knowledge in-house. So why would you want to spend so much extra money on having extra knowledge while you can just do it across platform? And none of the companies have switched so far. Even the companies I worked for like 7 years ago, they still use Titanium. So this is where the actual topic comes in of this talk. So what makes apps slow? And this is something that's actually for all technologies discounts. And are there any designers here? 1, 2. Okay, you're a designer. Okay, so a reason why a lot of apps are slow are designers. And
we all agree.
and I mean, not every designer, of course. But a lot of designers are. So for example, you have a cross-platform technology and they're like, oh cool, we can do the same UI everywhere. No, it's not a website. So for example, if you go to iOS and you have a header and a title, you could make something custom like this, right? I mean, you can do this natively as well, but in this case, I made it custom with just a gray background, title on it. Perfect, right? It's this amount of pixels high. I think this is like 90 or 100 pixels or something on the phone. But then, of course, you go to Android and then it doesn't, I mean, it works, it looks the same, but this is not how Android users perceive their header. Like on iOS, it sort of looks like this, but on Android, they're not. It's already feels a bit off. Same with buttons on the bottom, like tab group. So you have 3 tabs on Android on the bottom. It's fine. Default Android has also mostly on the top, but you can switch to bottom. Doesn't matter. So we make something custom. So then we deploy this in iOS. And all of a sudden, you cannot click it anymore because there's this stupid home button below. And this home button is there. And what you need to do is you need to move this up like 34 pixels. But you just don't know that it's 34. I mean, I know it. But then you need to think, OK, so when does this button show? Like, when is this line there and when isn't it? So you need to figure out, OK, what devices have this thing? And of course, then Apple comes out with a new phone next year, and then you need to add that to your app. So your app will be broken on that phone. So you move it up. And then you get an older iPhone, and then it looks like this. It's a bit pixely, by the way. But so it's too big, so you need to shrink it again. And then you get the dialogue and say, OK, well, we can build a pop-up like this. It looks fine on this phone, but it doesn't look fine on this phone. I mean, it's all over the place. But not only is this ugly in UI, I mean, I built this in like 20 minutes, but you could probably see that. And not only is this very ugly in UI, having to make everything custom makes the app like slow as hell. And this is noticeable because if you press a button, you expect feedback from your phone. Like on iOS, you can actually get those haptic feedback, right? When you press a button, you need to build this in completely yourself. So maybe you're just off by half a second, and then things feel weird. And this is what makes apps slow. And this is a real life example. This is not something I made. This is someone asking why did Apple reject my app? And you can see the buttons on the top, they're cut off. And this is because Apple uses an iPad to test. And if you use an iPhone app on an iPad, then it will not have the time indicator and stuff on the top because there's some space around it, right? So it cuts things off. You can see the buttons on the bottom, they seem like tabs, but are they really tabs? And then of course the text overlay and these kind of things. It just feels like I'm just use spaces again. But if you use native buttons and native things, your UI will stretch, everything will behave good, and it will feel much faster as a user. And this is just UX, right? This is not actual speed, this is UX speed, because this is what most people, this is the first thing that people notice on, for example, PhoneGap apps, is that speed is off. Like if I do a pull to refresh, then on PhoneGap apps, it will release too soon. It will not feel right. And these are the kind of things that a lot of people are like, I don't like this app. It's like, this makes the exception. It makes things feel slower. You see UI load. I mean, if you have loading issues on a PhoneGap app, you might actually see web pages without CSS. Like every now and then you encounter an app that's written like that. Yeah, they don't bundle the CSS in the app, or I have an update system built in or something. So the whole experience is off. So we covered designers. So CPU intensive changes. And as I said before, not only you have to deal with memory, you also have to deal with CPU. CPU is also a scarce resource on mobile. Do I have a slide next? No, okay. I have it a little further in my presentation. So if you are calculating stuff, for example, you need to resize a photo. Like someone took a photo with your app, and it's probably 10 megabytes and 8 megapixels or 10 megapixels or whatever, but you don't want to upload that package to the backend. So you figure, well, let's just resize and compress it in the app, but you put it on the same UI, you put it on the same CPU thread as the UI renders. That means that while the app is resizing the image, your pull to refresh will not work, or buttons will not respond, or these kind of things. Like, be careful. Try to not do those things. And that's like, iOS probably handles it fine because the devices are like, they have quite a lot of capacity, even the older ones. But the cheap Android phones, you need to watch out for those. And unfortunately, most people have cheap Android phones. A lot of people don't use just-in-time loading of data and rendering of UI. So for example, if you have 5 tabs in your tab group, which is the maximum iOS supports, a lot of apps load data on all 5 tabs at once. Like, are your user profiles on the second tab, so we'll render that. There's a list of photos on the third tab, so we'll render that. If you start the app and render all 5 tabs at once, your app startup time will be like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So you'll see the loading screen for a long time. But this is terrible user experience. People want to have an app loading in like a second or two. So what you need to do is you need to load only the tab that the user is going to. And then once that is rendered, your user will see that tab and then try to consider which one do I need to render next. Like the user profile, does the user go often there? So use your statistics. Does the user go to the profile most often? Then render that as well after the UI is loaded and the user is in. I need to cut it short? All right. Okay, I'll rush up a bit. So just-in-time rendering. And there's a bridge to consider on the cross-platform technologies, which is this. So if you render UI items, don't render them one at a time, because every time you render an item, it needs to render UI, it needs to go from JavaScript to native, which there's always a delay in there. So what you need to do is you push them to an array and add them at once. This is one crossing of the bridge. Like it's an API call, right? Every time you do an API call, you have a lot of overhead. It's not as big on mobile, but it is there. So if you do like 200 UI items, you'll have maybe a half a second delay. So how do you do it? Stick to native UI elements, convince your designers and managers, and then apps will look like this. So, and it will work on all devices. And the code is simple, just this, no platform specifics. If you have to do platform specifics, then, so first, dialogues, same thing, not the weird custom ones, but these ones. And it's also, code is simple, works cross-platform. But if you have to do platform specific, use these rules, because these will split your code up and not push the code to different platforms. So if you have iOS specific code, it will only live on iOS, for example. Do I have time for a small demo, or? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Just making sure. So I have a Hello World app, and I'm just going to compile it now to the iPhone 10. And as you can see, if I make this a bit bigger, like that, this is just a window. Like, that's it. An iPhone boot's always low, but there we go. So, hello world. But of course, you want to do add some logic and UI things to this. So we add it to a navigation window, and what it does is it adds the familiar bar on top. Android as well. Of course, you can just say, okay, so let me add a title to that, and it will automatically add that. Then, instead of a label saying hello world, you might want to render your data, because that's what most apps do anyway. So we add a list view. And now you can see, can you see on the screen? Yeah, you can see the stripes, which means there's different list items. You can scroll in this, you can add some pull to request features to this. And all of this will work on iPhone and on Android, but also on iPads and like all the devices. And until this stage, it will still work on Windows Phone even. Who uses Windows Phone? That's what I thought. But we have the support. Even Windows does not support it anymore, but Windows Phone it works. So of course, then you can easily add your data here using some list items. So it need to be in a section, I think. So we create a section, we add a list item, and we say we add a title to that list item, and then we have rendered data. And of course, this is really simplification of something. And let me give this thing an ID, because then I can reference it, and I'm going to go to the controller code. And when I do this, I can just dynamically create a window, and let's give it a background color of a nice red color. And then when it opens up, does it open up? I'm probably there we go. You can see it opening up. It has a nice red background color. It has the animations you can expect, and if you stick to these rules, you can even slide it back. If I have my like, you can even slide it back like this, because that's how native works, right? So if you stick to these UI elements and you don't overload your CPU or whatever, you can have a simple app like this running in no time. In fact, back in January, my boss told me, like not one level above me, like about 10 levels above me, he said, we have a conference in 3 weeks, and we want a mobile app to go with that conference. I mean, it's a little late to throw such a project on you, right? There wasn't even a design, so we had to wing it as developers. And so it was just me and a backend guy working with, I don't know what backend they used. And 3 weeks later, we had a conference, and we had a fully functional app, including chat and posting photos, these kind of things. And we didn't use any custom, not any parts that were completely ready. No, we actually built everything from scratch. And this is what rapid development in cross-platform technologies can be. If you know your shit, if you know the framework, you can roll out fully functional apps, production-ready apps in weeks. Even in a hackathon for 24 hours. I've done that before. So let me continue here. So then there's usually questions here.
No, but we will do the
afterwards, but before I go there, I have some ready. Are there any notable examples? So, does anyone play games here? Because you might know Warframe. I think it's a free game. They have a companion app. It's fully titanium. The American rental company Homes.com has a titanium app. The Chicago Transit Authority has a titanium app where you can buy tickets. And then there's the body shop in here. I believe that's also written in titanium. I believe the reviews are negative, but that's probably because it hasn't been updated in a while. But apps are there. I just have to find them. We have ES6, and we have TypeScript support, which I included the QR code. But I'll upload slides and then put it on some meetup or somewhere like that. And then questions, I guess, after. So, thank you.